I was out checking on my horses when I spotted her again. There she was, standing right in the middle of my corral, designer sunglasses perched on her nose, clipboard in hand, pointing at my fence posts like she owned the place. Karen Whitmore, president of the Willowbrook HOA, had finally crossed the line from annoying neighbor to criminal trespasser. "You need to cut these weeds immediately," she announced in that shrill voice that could make dogs howl 3 counties over. "And this fence is completely unacceptable. The paint is chipping, and it's bringing down our property values." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that assault charges weren't worth it. "Karen, for the 100th time, this is my property. You're trespassing. The HOA has no authority here. Now get out of my corral before my horses get spooked." Her face turned the color of an overripe tomato. "Don't you dare threaten me, Luke Morrison. I know my rights." She whipped out her phone with the dramatic flair of someone pulling a weapon. "I'm calling 911 right now. This man is threatening me with violence." I stood there, dumbfounded, as she spun a tale into her phone about how I was chasing her with farm equipment and making violent threats. Within minutes, I heard sirens screaming down the dirt road. 2 patrol cars skidded to a stop, and officers jumped out with hands on their weapons. "Sir, step away from the woman and keep your hands where we can see them," the lead officer commanded. This is how I met Deputy Rodriguez and learned firsthand that sometimes the most dangerous predators come wearing pearls and carrying clipboards instead of teeth and claws. My name's Luke Morrison, and I've owned the Double M Ranch for 15 years now. Used to ride rodeo professionally until a bull named Tornado decided my spine needed some creative redesigning. These days, I raise quarter horses and keep to myself on my 40 acres just outside the Willowbrook subdivision. It's good land, peaceful, with rolling hills and a creek that never runs dry. Or at least it was peaceful until the developers built that cookie-cutter neighborhood right up against my eastern property line. For 3 years now, I've been dealing with Karen Whitmore. She moved into one of those McMansions and immediately got herself elected HOA president by promising to clean up the neighborhood. Apparently, that included my ranch, which sits completely outside their jurisdiction. Didn't matter to Karen, though. She'd started with friendly suggestions about painting my barn a more neutral color, and escalated to official-looking letters on HOA letterhead demanding I remove my unsightly horse trailer from view. I'd tried being polite. I'd tried ignoring her. I'd even attended one of their board meetings to explain that their covenants and restrictions had about as much power over my property as a paper airplane in a hurricane. Karen had just smiled that tight little smile and said she'd look into it. The harassment had only gotten worse after that. The anonymous notes started showing up in my mailbox first. Complaints about everything from the sound of my rooster to the offensive odor of horse manure. Then came the false reports to the county about supposed code violations. The inspector got so tired of driving out here for nothing that he finally told me to file a harassment complaint. I should have listened. One morning, I woke up to find a landscaping crew attacking my hedgerow with power tools. Karen stood there supervising, insisting she was doing me a neighborly favor by improving my curb appeal. It took the sheriff's department to get them off my property, and even then, she acted like I was the unreasonable one. That's when I installed the cameras. 8 of them, covering every angle of my property line. High definition, night vision, motion activated, the works. Best investment I ever made, because what I caught on video next made everything else look like child's play. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the motion alerts started going off on my phone. I pulled up the live feed and couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was Karen, bold as brass, walking around my property with that clipboard of hers. She wasn't just peeking over the fence anymore. She was taking pictures of my barn, my equipment, even my horses. She spent 20 minutes documenting every piece of machinery, every pile of hay, every water trough. I saved every second of that footage to multiple drives. Then I did it again the next day when she came back. And the day after that. By the end of the week, I had enough video evidence to wallpaper her McMansion. But I wanted to handle this the right way, through proper channels. I prepared a cease and desist letter and decided to deliver it in person, with a witness. My neighbor Tom agreed to come along. He dealt with Karen's nonsense too when she tried to fine him for having the wrong shade of beige on his mailbox. We found her in my north pasture, actually inside the fence this time, taking photos of my compost pile. Karen, this needs to stop, I said, keeping my voice level and calm. Tom had his phone out, recording everything. You're trespassing on private property. I have you on video multiple times this week. Here's a cease and desist letter. If you come on my property again, I'll press charges. That's when she lost it completely. Her face went from red to purple, and she started screaming so loud that my horses in the next pasture over started running. How dare you threaten me? I have every right to document these violations. You're operating an illegal commercial facility in a residential area. I'll sue you for everything you own. I'll have this place condemned. She stormed off toward her car, still screaming threats about lawyers and lawsuits. Tom and I watched her go, shaking our heads. That woman's crazier than a bag of cats, Tom muttered. We had no idea how crazy she was about to prove herself to be. 20 minutes later, I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard the sirens. I figured there must be an accident on the main road until I saw the patrol cars turning into my driveway. 2 units, lights flashing, officers approaching with hands on weapons. My blood ran cold. Sir, we need you to step outside with your hands visible, Deputy Rodriguez called out. We received a report that you threatened a woman with a shovel and chased her off your property. I couldn't help but laugh, which probably wasn't the smartest response. Deputy, I don't even own a shovel. I use a tractor for everything. And I've got security cameras covering every inch of this property. Would you like to see what really happened? The deputies exchanged glances. You have video of the incident? Multiple angles, high definition, with audio. My neighbor Tom was also here as a witness. He lives right over that hill. And I've got videos from earlier this week showing that same woman trespassing repeatedly. Deputy Rodriguez relaxed slightly. Let's take a look at that footage. I led them inside and pulled up the videos on my computer. We watched Karen's repeated trespasses, her photo documentary of my property, and finally, the confrontation from that afternoon. The audio was crystal clear, catching every word of her threats to sue and have my property condemned. At no point did I have any tool in my hand, let alone chase her with one. The deputies' expressions went from skeptical to shocked to angry as they watched. She told us you were violent and unstable, Deputy Rodriguez said, shaking his head. Said you'd threaten to hurt her if she came near your property again. This is completely different from what she reported. I told her I'd press trespassing charges, I said. That's hardly the same thing as threatening violence. And as you can see, she was trespassing. Multiple times. Rodriguez pulled out his notepad. We're going to need copies of all these videos. And we'll need a statement from your witness. Filing a false police report is a serious crime. So is trespassing. The other deputy nodded. We'll be having a conversation with Mrs. Whitmore about the consequences of lying to law enforcement. Word travels fast in a small community. By the next morning, everyone in Willowbrook knew that their HOA president had been caught filing a false police report. The security footage had gone from evidence to entertainment, as neighbors shared the story of Karen's spectacular meltdown. But if anyone thought that would make her back down, they didn't know Karen Whitmore. Instead of apologizing or retreating, she doubled down with the determination of a gambler chasing losses. She called an emergency HOA meeting for that Saturday, sending out notices that claimed there were urgent safety concerns that needed immediate attention. I heard about it from Tom, who'd gotten his notice and immediately called to warn me. She's lost her mind completely, Tom said. The agenda talks about implementing new view ordinances that would somehow extend to adjacent properties. She's trying to find a way to legally force you to comply with HOA standards. I thanked Tom for the heads up and made some calls of my own. Turns out, quite a few Willowbrook residents were fed up with Karen's reign of terror. They'd been looking for an excuse to challenge her, and her recent criminal behavior had given them the perfect opportunity. Saturday arrived, and the Willowbrook Community Center was packed. I sat in the back with Tom and several other sympathetic neighbors. Karen stood at the podium, looking haggard but defiant, her usually perfect hair slightly askew. She launched into a speech about maintaining property values and the importance of visual harmony in the greater neighborhood area. "We need to expand our influence to protect our investments," she declared, her voice taking on that shrill quality that made people wince. "Properties adjacent to our community reflect on us, and we have a responsibility to ensure they meet certain standards." That's when Margaret Chen stood up. Margaret was a retired attorney who'd moved to Willowbrook for the quiet life but had found herself constantly battling Karen's overreach. "Point of order, Madam President. You're currently under investigation for criminal trespassing and filing a false police report. Should you really be presiding over this meeting?" The room erupted. People who'd been holding their tongues for years suddenly found their voices. Stories poured out about Karen's harassment, her arbitrary fines, her abuse of power. Someone mentioned the landscaping crew she'd sicked on me. Another person brought up the time she'd tried to fine a resident for having the wrong species of flowers in their garden. "I move for a vote of no confidence in our current president," Margaret announced over the chaos. "All in favor?" The response was overwhelming. Nearly every hand in the room shot up. Karen's face went from purple to white as she realized she'd lost control of her kingdom. But the residents weren't done yet. "I also move that the HOA file a restraining order against Karen Whitmore on behalf of our neighbor Luke Morrison," Margaret continued. "Her actions have brought shame on our community and exposed us to potential legal liability." All in favor. Again, the vote was nearly unanimous. Karen stood frozen at the podium, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Someone else made a motion to audit the HOA finances, suspicious of where all those arbitrary fines had been going. That vote passed too. But the final blow came when Richard Stevens, the HOA's treasurer, stood up with a copy of their bylaws. According to Section 12, Subsection 3, any board member who engages in criminal activity that brings disrepute to the association is subject to immediate removal and fines up to $5,000. I move to invoke this clause against Karen Whitmore for her documented trespassing and false reporting. The vote was swift and decisive. In less than an hour, Karen had gone from HOA president to persona non grata, facing a $5,000 fine from the very organization she'd used as her personal weapon. As the meeting concluded and people filed out, Karen remained at the podium, gripping it like a life raft. Her perfect world of rules and control had crumbled around her. The last thing I heard as I left was Margaret Chen informing her that she had 30 days to pay the fine or face legal action from the HOA's attorney. I installed a new gate the following week. Custom made, with an electronic lock and an intercom system. But the best part was the sign I had made for it. In bold, professional lettering, it read, "Private property. No trespassing. No Karens allowed." The criminal charges took a few months to work through the system, but Deputy Rodriguez kept me updated. Karen was ultimately convicted of filing a false police report and criminal trespassing. The judge, who'd apparently dealt with her type before, sentenced her to 200 hours of community service, 12 months of probation, and a fine of $3,000. Her real estate license, which I hadn't even known she had, was suspended for 6 months, costing her thousands more in lost commissions. The look on her face when the judge read the sentence was something I'll never forget. Complete shock, as if she couldn't comprehend that her actions had actual consequences. She'd spent so long wielding the HOA like a weapon that she'd forgotten the real world had bigger sticks.